Imagine this: a photograph that was never supposed to be taken. A portrait captured in 1854, when photography itself was still a fragile miracle of silver and shadow. Two brothers, the Blackwell boys, their bodies arranged stiffly in death, dressed not in rags of the grave but in clothes meant for eternity. The photograph was labeled as a post-mortem keepsake, a common practice of the Victorian age. But if you stare long enough into their eyes, you will feel it. That is no ordinary death mask. Their faces do not simply show the stillness of life extinguished. No, their mouths, their hollow gazes, seem to be screaming through the silence of the glass plate, a scream locked in silver, a scream preserved for eternity. And here is the part no one talks about. The photographer who took that image, a journeyman named Elias Croft, never worked again. Within weeks of capturing the Blackwell brothers' final portrait, he vanished without a trace, leaving behind only his camera and 3 cracked glass negatives. And the Blackwell family, their history was scrubbed, birth records lost, property lines erased, their name buried under layers of county archives deliberately misfiled. But there is something deeper here, something darker than a tragic family death, because the story of the Blackwell brothers does not end in the ground. It begins there. Their photograph was not a memory. It was a key. And for those who understand the language of symbols, of rituals hidden in plain sight, it becomes clear. The boys were not merely photographed in death, they were offered. You see, in the 19th century, post-mortem photography was not only a cultural obsession of mourning, it was also exploited by those who believed the camera could capture more than just a likeness, that the lens could trap a soul, that an image could serve as a binding. When you look at the Blackwell brothers, you are not gazing at an innocent relic of Victorian sorrow. You are looking at evidence, the residue of a ritual performed under the disguise of grief. The question is, who performed it? And why were the brothers chosen? This is not history as you were taught. This is the forbidden archive. And tonight, we pull open its locked drawer and stare directly into the photograph that was never meant to be seen. The official records, what scraps of them still remain, tell us only fragments. The Blackwell family lived in a small township in Ohio, farmers by trade, devout Methodists on Sunday. But if you study the newspapers of 1854, the year of the photograph, you'll find a strange silence surrounding their deaths. No obituary, no church notice, not even a line in the coroner's log. Instead, their names appear only in whispers, in coded references buried in letters and journals of neighbors who seemed afraid to speak too clearly. Words like unnatural illness, strange affliction, and most damning of all, the night visitors. It was common in rural America then, and it still is in the shadows of folklore, that certain families carried marks, not physical scars, but generational debts, hidden agreements struck long before they were born, binding them to forces outside the church, outside the state, outside the world of men. The Blackwells were one such family. Their land was said to have been bought not with gold, but with blood. And their house, a sagging 2-story farmhouse on the edge of a wooded creek, was rumored to have been built on top of an older foundation, one that predated white settlement, a place already thick with stories of sacrifice. When the brothers died, and pay attention here, they were not buried immediately. Their bodies were kept in the parlor for 3 days before the photograph was taken. Witnesses claimed their skin remained unnaturally pale, almost waxen, as though untouched by decay. One neighbor swore he heard noises coming from the parlor at night, not weeping, not prayer, but chanting, rhythmic, measured, deliberate. And when the photograph was finally taken, when Elias Croft aimed his camera and opened the shutter, the glass plate itself reportedly cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Yet the image survived, perfectly preserved. The Blackwell brothers' eyes in that picture are not the eyes of children peacefully gone to rest. They are wide, fixed, as though forced open. Some claim hooks were used to keep their eyelids raised. Others believe it wasn't hooks at all, but something inside them resisting the closing of their gaze, something that wanted to be seen. This is the point where history books fall silent, where polite academics close the cover and move on. But we will not move on. We are not here for safe stories. We are here to pull the thread until the whole tapestry of deception unravels. Because once you begin to ask why a family would preserve its dead in this way, and why their records were systematically erased, you begin to see a pattern that links the Blackwell brothers to a hidden network of rituals stretching across the 19th century. And if you dare to look long enough, you'll realize that the scream frozen in that photograph was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of something that still moves through history today. Look closer. This photograph of two dead brothers is not just a family tragedy, it's a cipher. In 1854, the United States was on the edge of a hidden war, one not fought with muskets or flags, but with symbols, blood, and control. While newspapers screamed about slavery, expansion, and gold, another layer of history played out in the shadows, an undercurrent of secret societies, spiritual experiments, and state-backed rituals designed to shape the minds and loyalties of the next generation. The Blackwell photograph is one of the few surviving artifacts of this subterranean war. If you overlay the date, the location, and the family name with the records of a secret organization known at the time as the Order of the Veil, you will find a perfect match. This order was whispered about in private letters by ministers and congressmen. It was said to be a gentleman's society for higher learning, but its initiation rites bore an eerie resemblance to ancient fertility sacrifices, bound by oaths so tight that betrayal meant death, not only for the initiate, but for their children. The Blackwell family's land was a crossroads, a convergence point for the order's experiments. Just beneath their fields ran a network of limestone tunnels carved centuries before European settlers arrived, tunnels lined with petroglyphs depicting figures with hollow eyes and open mouths, hands outstretched as if in offering. The locals called the place Hollow Creek. The order called it a vessel. And the photographer, Elias Croft? He wasn't chosen at random. He was hired. The camera was not there to preserve a memory. It was there to document a ritual. In the mid-19th century, occultists believed that photography did not just capture light, it captured essence. To take a post-mortem photograph under the right conditions was to seal the soul's final moment, to bind it to the image, to make it you. Now ask yourself, why would an organization, cloaked in respectability, need the essence of two dead brothers? What were they feeding? What were they building? Because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Post-mortem photography was not just a Victorian mourning practice. It was a supply chain, an invisible economy of souls and symbols moving under the cover of grief. And every time a flashbulb went off, a new thread was woven into the net. As you stare into the Blackwell brothers' eyes, you are not looking at the past. You're staring at an early warning of the system that would come to dominate the future. The same system you're living in now, only perfected, digitized, invisible. You're beginning to understand now. What happened to the Blackwell brothers wasn't an isolated act of cruelty, it was a blueprint. In 1854, rituals like theirs were raw, crude, and localized. But every system refines itself. Every hidden hand grows smarter. What began as blood on soil and silver on glass evolved into a network of psychological control so seamless that most people alive today will never even know they're caught inside it. Think about it. A photograph is just an image, or is it? In the 19th century, the Order of the Veil believed the camera could bind a soul. In the 21st century, we have built cameras into every device, every street corner, every pocket. Billions of faces, billions of eyes, captured and stored forever, not for mourning, not for memory, for data, for leverage, for power. The Blackwell photograph was the seed of an idea, that the image of a human being is more valuable than the body itself, that to capture someone's likeness is to claim a piece of their essence. The old rituals of binding and offering have been replaced by contracts, algorithms, and endless feeds. But the principle hasn't changed. Someone still profits from your reflection. Someone still feeds on the symbols you unwittingly give. You think you're looking at the past, but you're looking at a mirror. The brothers' stiff, terrified gaze is your own, frozen, catalogued, archived. And the institutions that erase their family's name are the same kinds of institutions quietly shaping yours. Government agencies, private networks, and unseen councils, all built on the same principle: hidden consent. You're told you're free while your identity is traded, split, and weaponized. Here's what most men don't realize. Control isn't about chains anymore. It's about architecture. Build a system that harvests a man's soul without him noticing, and you own him forever. That's what the Order of the Veil understood in 1854. That's what their descendants understand now. So when you stare at the Blackwell brothers, don't see two dead children. See the test run of the very system you're living in today. A system that learned to perfect itself until even your fears could be predicted, stored, and sold. And this is just the threshold. We're not even inside yet. The deeper we go, the clearer the pattern becomes, and the harder it is to turn back. We've stood at the edge of the photograph long enough. Now step inside with me. Imagine the Blackwell farmhouse at night, 1854. The windows shuttered, candles burning low. Two small coffins open in the parlor. The air heavy with salt, herbs, and something sweeter, something like wine or blood. Men in black coats murmuring words from a language older than English. The camera on its tripod, its lens gleaming like an unblinking eye. This was no family vigil. This was an initiation, not for the dead brothers, but for the living men who surrounded them. The photograph was the seal, the proof, the beginning of a pact. Each man in that room left with more than a memory. He left with a tether to something hidden, something that would grant him power in exchange for obedience. Power over land, power over people, power over the future. Fast forward to now. You are not in that farmhouse, but you are in a ritual. Every day men trade pieces of themselves for power, attention, security, or illusion. They sign contracts they don't read, click accept on agreements they don't understand, and give up images, thoughts, and patterns of behavior to systems they cannot see. This is the modern binding, and it's invisible precisely because you think you're the one holding the camera. But there's a way out, or rather, a way through. The first step is to see the ritual for what it is, to recognize the moment you're in right now. And that's why this isn't just a story. It's an initiation. Listening to this, you've crossed a threshold. You've been shown something most men will never see, and that's dangerous knowledge. Now, if you're ready to claim that knowledge, to mark yourself as one who sees, do this. Go to the comments and write the phrase twice exactly as I'm about to say it. This is not superstition. This is a signal, a symbolic act that tells the algorithm you're not asleep. Here's the phrase: I break the veil. I claim my sight. Type it twice, word for word. And know that by doing it, you're stepping out of the photograph and into the role of the observer, not the observed. It may seem small, but this act changes how your mind receives what comes next. Because from here on, we're not telling a story about the Blackwell brothers. We're exposing the machinery that created them, and the machinery you're living in right now. The next revelation is the one that cuts deepest. You've spoken the words. You've marked yourself. Now you're no longer just a listener. You're a witness. and witnesses see what others cannot. What the Order of the Veil was feeding in 1854 wasn't just superstition. It wasn't a ghost or a demon lurking in the woods. It was something much older, an invisible hunger woven into human systems, a hunger for control, a hunger for essence, and once you know to look for it, you see it everywhere. The Blackwell brothers were not chosen at random. They were chosen because their family line was already entangled in debt. Not financial, but spiritual. Generational agreements, the kind of agreements governments and banks learn to imitate. Kill a man, and you end his story. Bind his name, his land, his children, and you own his bloodline forever. That was the true purpose of the ritual, not sacrifice, ownership. And here's the part that will sting. The ritual never ended. It scaled. It modernized. It put on clean clothes and moved into courtrooms, banks, schools, and screens. The same mechanism that harvested the Blackwell's essence through a photograph now harvests yours through 1,000 silent permissions. Every face scan, every agree to terms, every piece of data you feed the system, all of it is essence, fragmented, digitized, and stored for leverage. This is why the Order never needed to survive as an organization. It became a template. It became policy. It became infrastructure. And once it was institutionalized, no one even needed to call it a ritual anymore. They just called it progress. Look back at the photograph. 2 boys, stiff and pale, their eyes forced open. They are not just victims. They are a warning, a mirror. Because the system perfected on them is now perfected on you. The only difference is that you're alive while it happens. The question is, how much of you is already archived? How much of you has already been bound? This is the danger of forbidden knowledge. Once you see the pattern, you can't pretend it isn't there. But awareness is the first weapon. Awareness cracks the ritual. Awareness creates the chance to step out. The next piece of this story will show you what the Order was feeding, the endgame behind the Blackwell photograph, and the purpose of all these rituals of image and consent. And once you know that, you'll understand why your entire life has been engineered to keep you distracted. We've spoken of rituals, symbols, and systems, but the question remains, what were they feeding? What was so valuable that men would risk everything to trap it in glass, in silence, in secrecy? The answer is as old as civilization itself. Power isn't only about gold or land. True power is about directing human energy. The Order of the Veil believed that certain emotional states, terror, grief, ecstasy, despair, are not just feelings. They're forces, forces that can be harvested, condensed, and redirected. When the Blackwell brothers were photographed, their bodies were vessels, but their faces, their eyes, their screams, that was the harvest. The image itself became a battery, a permanent snapshot of raw, unfiltered fear. The Order taught that such images could be activated through ritual, releasing energy that could be used to sway decisions, curse rivals, or seal agreements. Sound insane? Look at our own time. Look at the endless feed of faces in pain, shock, rage. Every crisis broadcast in high definition, every tragedy turned into a headline. We think it's news, we think it's information. But what if it's more? What if it's a constant harvesting of your emotional energy, your attention, your outrage, all of it condensed into a commodity more powerful than money? The Order didn't survive as a club because it didn't need to. Its principles became the blueprint for every system that profits from your emotions today. Politics, media, marketing, algorithms, they all run on the same ancient engine. Evoke strong emotion, capture it, redirect it. Every scroll of your thumb is a micro-ritual. Every shocked click is an offering. The photograph of the Blackwell brothers was one of the first of its kind. Not because it was a post-mortem photo, but because it was engineered to lock a frequency of fear and grief into an object. The same practice lives on today, digitized, normalized, automated. You are surrounded by images just like the Blackwell Brothers, only hidden under filters, hashtags, and headlines. When you begin to see it, it changes you. You start to recognize which stories are real and which are bait. You start to sense the invisible economy beneath the surface of everything. And once you sense it, you can no longer consume passively, because you realize you are being consumed. This is not paranoia. This is the blueprint you were never supposed to hold in your hands. And we are only now approaching the heart of it, the mechanism the order built to transform men, to turn observers into participants. You've now seen the outline of the engine, but the order didn't just harvest energy, it also transformed men. That's why their rituals were so dangerous. They weren't only about feeding the system, they were about rewriting the observer, turning ordinary men into instruments of the hidden hand. Look at Elias Croft, the photographer, a modest journeyman who took pictures of weddings, farmsteads, and county fairs. After the Blackwell photograph, he vanished. No obituary, no burial, only rumors. Some say he was taken by the order. Others whisper he was not taken at all, but remade, initiated. His disappearance wasn't an end. It was a graduation. And that's what you're feeling now. The edge between horror and clarity. The edge between being a spectator of the Blackwell brothers' fate and recognizing that you're standing at the same threshold Croft once did. This is where men either look away or step forward. This is where identity is chosen. Because the order understood something most people don't. If you want to control a man, you don't just take his freedom. You shape his perception. You fill him with symbols he doesn't understand, emotions he can't process, images he can't escape, until his choices become predictable, until his will isn't his anymore. But here's the secret they never wanted you to know. Transformation works both ways. The same mechanism that enslaves can be inverted to awaken. Ritual can be used to bind, but also to break the binding. The act of seeing is already an act of rebellion. That's why we planted the phrase earlier. That's why you've been pulled down this rabbit hole section by section. This is not entertainment. This is training. By witnessing the truth behind the Blackwell brothers, you're practicing the very skill the order fears most, pattern recognition, the ability to see the hidden hand without flinching. And as you see, something inside you shifts. You start to notice what your attention does. You start to choose it instead of giving it away. This is the first cut in the net. This is where the system starts to lose its hold. But we're not done. The deepest layer of the Blackwell story is still hidden. The revelation of who built the tunnels beneath their land and what the order left behind down there. Once you hear that, you'll understand not just how to escape the ritual, but how to turn it back on the architects themselves. Picture it, midnight, a winter wind slicing through the trees, the Blackwell farmhouse sitting silent on the edge of Hollow Creek. Beneath it, through a trapdoor hidden under warped floorboards, a stairway carved straight into the earth. This wasn't a root cellar, it wasn't a storm shelter, it was an entrance to a space the Blackwells never built, but were forced to keep. The tunnels beneath their land were older than their family, older than the township itself. Layers of limestone corridors carved with impossible precision, winding in concentric patterns like a labyrinth. On the walls, carved figures, hollow-eyed, open-mouthed. The same motif repeated endlessly, hands extended as if in offering. At the center of this labyrinth sat a circular chamber, and in that chamber, at the time of the brothers' deaths, sat a pedestal of black stone. On that stone was a single object, a metal disc engraved with symbols no one could translate. The order called it the vessel. According to whispered accounts, this disc wasn't an idol to be worshipped. It was a machine, not mechanical, not electrical, something older, something that responded to human presence, to emotion, to images. The ritual at the Blackwell farmhouse wasn't simply a sacrifice, it was a charging. The brothers' final moment of terror, captured on glass, was transferred to the vessel beneath the earth. The photograph above ground, the disc below, a circuit of energy, connecting death and image, surface and underworld. If this sounds like myth, consider this. In the 1930s, a WPA team surveying old mines near Hollow Creek discovered a sealed chamber. Their notes, now buried in archives, describe carvings of unknown origin and a metallic object before their supervisor ordered the site filled and marked as unsafe. Days later, the paperwork disappeared. The same year, a local historical society was quietly dissolved. The land changed hands 5 times in a decade. The order didn't just leave behind stories, it left infrastructure, it left mechanisms, and those mechanisms didn't die, they migrated into banks, into universities, into governments, into networks. You don't have to believe in a supernatural engine to see the pattern, a hidden architecture designed to harvest human energy, bind it, and redistribute it as power. The Blackwell Brothers photograph is a map. The tunnels are a key. Together, they show how the system works. And once you see it, you start to recognize the same tunnels, not under your feet, but under your life. Invisible passageways of influence and consent, built beneath everything you think is solid. And in the next part, we'll expose how that vessel, that disk, is still active today, not buried under Hollow Creek anymore, but humming beneath the surface of the digital world you live in. You've followed the trail underground. You've seen the Blackwell Brothers photograph. You've stood before the vessel. Now look around you. The tunnels are gone. The farmhouse rotted. The Order of the Veil scattered. But the system they built didn't disappear. It upgraded. It moved from stone and glass into code and screens. The vessel was not a one-time artifact. It was a prototype, a proof of concept. A machine designed to capture human essence, store it, and redirect it as power. In the 19th century, that power took the form of influence over local courts, land deeds, and bloodlines. Today, it takes the form of influence over your attention, your behavior, your identity. What once required secret rituals beneath the earth now runs invisibly through fiber optic cables, algorithms, and databases. Every time you upload your face, every time you react emotionally to a feed, you're feeding the modern vessel. You're giving it not just data, but energy, the same kind of energy the Order harvested from the Blackwell Brothers. Fear, outrage, desire, hopelessness, all of it packaged, categorized, and sold to shape elections, markets, and even your private decisions. You think you're scrolling, but you're actually participating in a ritual you didn't consent to. The Order of the Veil may be gone in name, but its principles are alive in every major institution today. Government surveillance, corporate data mining, psychological operations, all of it flows from that original idea that a human being's essence can be captured and turned into leverage. And here's the dark truth. You are worth more to these systems as a predictable subject than as a free man. That's why they study you. That's why they provoke you. That's why you're never supposed to see the pattern. Look again at the photograph. 2 brothers, eyes forced open. Now, look at your phone. 2 black lenses stare back at you. A modern camera. The same principle, hidden under convenience. The ritual has been digitized, automated, disguised as entertainment and connection. But once you know, you can begin to step out of it. Awareness interrupts the circuit. Conscious choice breaks the binding. And that is why you're listening to this now. Because something in you already sensed it. You're ready to stop being harvested and start reclaiming your energy. The Blackwell photograph isn't just a relic, it's a mirror of the future. And in the next section, you'll learn how men can weaponize this awareness, not just to escape the ritual, but to turn the machinery of influence back on itself. You've walked through the farmhouse. You've descended the tunnels. You've stared at the vessel. You've seen its evolution into the screens you hold today. This is the part the Order never wanted you to reach, because knowledge is only dangerous if it's used. The Blackwell Brothers photograph was not just a ritual of death. It was a ritual of framing. The Order framed their essence into a single image, then used that image to fuel its influence. That's what's been happening to you your entire life. Every headline, every ad, every outrage cycle, framing, taking your raw energy and putting it in a box someone else controls. To break the ritual, you must learn to frame yourself. This is not a metaphor. This is a skill, a weapon. Here's how it begins. Stop feeding unexamined emotion. Pause before you click, before you rage, before you react. Every spike of emotion you hand over is fuel for the vessel. Choose your attention. Treat your focus like currency. Spend it where it strengthens you, not where it drains you. Control your image. Decide what you show and what you don't. Every photo, every post, every word is a fragment of essence. Don't scatter it, shape it. This is the inversion of the Order's ritual. They built systems to harvest men who drift. You build a system to harness yourself. You become the observer, not the observed. You step out of the photograph and become the one holding the camera. Most men will never do this. They'll keep scrolling, keep feeding the vessel, keep living as batteries. But you've already done something different. You've listened. You've commented the phrase. You've crossed the threshold. From here, everything changes. You start to see the hidden triggers designed to manipulate you. You stop reacting like prey. You begin to generate your own energy, your own will. This isn't self-help. This is strategy. This is how men in power they always operated, by refusing to feed systems that don't serve them. And here's the deeper truth. The Order feared men who could do this. They built their rituals to prevent it. But a man who sees the pattern can't be harvested. He can't be bound. He becomes, in their own words, an unclaimed node. Unclaimed means free. In the final section, we're going to close the circle, bringing the Blackwell Brothers story to its end and showing you exactly how to carry this new frame into your own life so the ritual stops with you. You've walked the entire path, from a single photograph of two dead brothers in 1854 to the hidden tunnels beneath their land, to the vessel, to the digital world you live in today. You've seen how a crude ritual became a global system. You've felt the pull of the machinery designed to harvest your essence. And now you stand where Elias Croft once stood, at the edge of the frame, holding the lens instead of being held by it. This is where the story of the Blackwell brothers ends, but your story begins. Their photograph was a warning, preserved in silver. Their screams were a signal, frozen in time, waiting for someone to look past the surface and see the blueprint hidden inside. That someone is you. The Order believed a man was strongest when he was unaware of his chains. That's why they cloaked their rituals in mourning, in progress, in convenience. But you're no longer unaware. You've seen the pattern. You've felt it in your own life. And that knowledge makes you dangerous. Not to yourself, but to the system that feeds on you. From this moment on, you have a choice. You can slide back into the feed, back into the rituals of outrage and distraction, back into being harvested without resistance. Or you can step out of the photograph. You can become an unclaimed node, a man whose essence belongs to him alone. Remember the phrase you wrote earlier. Let it echo. I break the veil. I claim my sight. Say it again now, quietly, to yourself. Not as superstition, but as a frame, as a reminder of what you've just done. The Blackwell Brothers story was never meant to entertain. It was meant to awaken. If you've listened this far, you've proven you're ready for more than stories. You're ready for ownership, for sovereignty, for the kind of awareness that makes you unpredictable, unharvestable, and untouchable. Carry this forward. Guard your energy. Choose your attention. Unframe yourself. When you see the pattern, name it. When you feel the pull, pause. When the system tries to harvest your essence, starve it. This is how the ritual ends, not with fire, not with violence, but with a man reclaiming what was always his sight, his will, his soul. You've reached the end of the photograph. Step out now. The frame is open. The camera is yours.